Hey everybody, welcome to Ask the D&D Professors. Tonight we're going to be talking about, as the title says, Bad Bunny and La Llorona, which makes more sense than you might think. Anyway, I'm Chris. I'm one of the Open the Gates Gaming um, people. Gustavo, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Gustavo. I am another Open the Gates people. Um, or
Um,
maybe tonight we are personas.
yeah, somos personas. So tonight it's the two Latino guys on the team
Yeah.
coming to you to talk about any number of things. I think we it was floated to us the idea of kind of like, what about the halftime show that Bad Bunny did at the Super Bowl
Thanks.
this past? Um, very good.
I was sorry. The chat's getting
I
to me
guess,
already.
yeah, I just saw it. This idea was floated to us, which there's some backstory there, which I'll get into in a second. But then it's also like there's some interesting questions going on there in terms of things like representation and narrative and things that we like to talk about when it comes to TTRPGs and D&D. So we figured we would just kind of see what happens. But to give you some of the backstory here. Um, Sometimes the university press office just tells you to do things, and it winds up being things you didn't expect. So I was asked to basically um, contribute to a pitch sheet about Bad Bunny and Latin music, and I didn't know what that is. So I was like, sure. They sent me some questions about those subjects, and I wrote some answers. And then they sent me back an article, and I thought, oh, okay, cool. This is probably just going to the university news or something. And then on Wednesday of last week, I got a call, or rather an email from the university press office saying, hey, CNN wants to talk to you about Bad Bunny on Sunday. To which I said, what? And yeah, so then it went from there. It kind of snowballed. In any case, I did a number of interviews about Bad Bunny. And then, of course, watched the Super Bowl halftime show. But anyway, so I got used to talking about it, I guess. But it's been, well, I think it was on a lot of our minds, even without kind of, my personal backstory. But yeah, I don't know. We were just talking about this a little bit before the stream. Gustavo's, yeah, like you said, you had thoughts about the halftime show, and I promise we're going to get to D&D eventually.
I mean, it was not so much thoughts, but like feelings.
Ah,
I will say that uh, I am very white passing.
mm,
Listen to my beautiful accent, or lack of one, and all these things, and so and that's kind of become a way of life in many
mm,
ways.
mhm,
I live in a small town in Appalachia. The need, uh, there's no, not the need, is what am I trying to say here? The opportunities to sort of express the
mm,
Latin parts of my identity are few and far between.
yes,
Um, and so it is it's really nice to see a reflection of
mm,
that part of me,
yeah,
mainstreamed
hmm,
in such a way, and I don't know if this the second it came on,
yeah,
it is so it's extremely Puerto Rican coded, but it's
yeah,
also extremely Caribbean coded. And
yeah,
my background is I'm Cuban, and
yeah,
so a lot of stuff really transfers. So opening on this cane field
yeah,
is like there are family photos of when my family lived in the country of Cuba,
hmm,
of cane fields in the background and things like this.
hmm,
And it was just and from the jump, it was like that. And I was just every little thing was kind of telling its own little story, and
yeah,
really speaking to that. And it was really beautiful and wonderful. And I think he made a lot of effort to include
yeah,
everyone. One of the big talking points I think about this whole thing has been sort of how America is defined in the Americas, or being
hmm,
American is defined in the Americas, and
yeah,
ser americano, to be an American, means
yeah,
you are from this half of the planet.
yes.
It is
Yeah,
Canada to Argentina.
yeah, I did love like the Canadian reactions to, hey, he said Canada. Are we Latino now? But yeah, like I mean I agree. Like I am also pretty white passing, and I live in the same town you do. And so I, experience that same, eh, lack of opportunity to, yeah, to be in community with other Latino people. And yeah, so watching it was really, really amazing. And I grew up in Miami, and like my family is Salvadoran, but my aunt is Cuban, and there's just a lot of Cuban stuff happening in Miami. So a lot of the Caribbean stuff landed for me too, in some interesting ways. Although the thing that really landed for me was that bit right in the middle where he like does this like 10-second history of reggaeton, through these like huge samples, and then goes into AO. And I was just like, oh, it's high school. I was back in high school dancing to Gasolina. So I very much appreciated that. Also, then immediately afterward, when there was that, everybody lost their minds about the little kid lying on the three chairs. That was me. I was that kid once, just like falling asleep at a family party.
Uh,
Yeah,
100%. I think we've all, well, not we've all, but we've the little kid at the family party finding any place to nest was amazing. Um,
uh,
for me, when Ricky Martin came on, I'm a
yeah,
slightly older
yeah,
person, but that was like the we called it the Latin explosion
yeah,
back in the
yeah,
day, and like yeah, I had a lot of fun listening to Ricky Martin. I'm gonna date myself in college,
yeah.
um, uh,
I mean,
and
hey,
it was I mean, it was great. It was a great time to be alive.
yeah, no, Ricky Martin was huge.
So it was really fun to see him on stage. I did a double take. I asked my wife. I was like, "Is that Ricky Martin?" This is
It's
great.
great
I love
too.
this. I love this.
Yeah. Um,
So that was really fun.
yes. Will says in chat, the only thing that took over was beating the Patriots with remote controls. And people tried to turn the English back on. Indeed. Although I will also say, I also love that like Bad Bunny got more rushing yards than the Patriots did in total.
I saw that stat. I also heard a very funny joke that nobody named Drake has had a Super Bowl this bad since last year.
Very good.
Um,
Also, just that football was just boring
it was not a
too.
great game.
Um,
The
like,
halftime show was by far like the
oh,
most
yeah,
exciting part of it.
absolute best part of that whole experience.
By far the
Uh,
fastest moving part of
yeah, that
the whole
too.
event.
Yeah. But yeah, so that like there were so many moments in there that, you know, certainly a lot of it was very specifically Puerto Rican, and like if you know the history of the island and kind of what's been going on there, a lot of that stuff will land. But also like a lot of things that, yeah, were just kind of Latino. And then actually, to get back to your point, Gustavo, the thing at the end with Americanos, right, is like if you say that in Spanish, you refer to, yeah, the whole hemisphere. People in the US are really the only people that refer to themselves as Americans and mean we're the US. So this is like a really interesting just linguistic divide that people, when they speak Spanish, it means one thing. When you speak English, it means another thing. And so, Bad Bunny's kind of choice to do that thing at the end where he says, God bless America, and then pulls out all the flags. Well, most of the flags, we're like three or so countries missing, but most of the flags of the hemisphere, and to say we are all Americans, is both a very pointed gesture, but also completely everyday, like completely normal. Um,
Yeah, but also I think it's inclusive, right? And there's a
yes, absolutely, yeah,
uh, and I think that like it is weird that something so inclusive and like the show was about love, right?
yeah,
Like fundamentally it was about like bringing everybody in.
yeah,
Um and it's sad that is in this moment pointed.
yep. Yeah, I mean, well, and we don't have to get into language politics of it all because that's tired at this point. But yeah, I mean, and there's some interesting. I've read some interesting critiques in the last few days about kind of it's still the Super Bowl. It's still an orgy of capitalist cash grabs. And Bad Bunny's doing just fine. Um, but at the same time, like multiple things can be true, right? Like the Super Bowl can be the Super Bowl. The NFL can be a greedy sports organization that wants to make lots and lots of money and is trying to widen its markets because its market in the US is probably saturated. Um, but then it can also be the case that a show can be celebrating a particular kind of identity representing particular people that have not had that kind of a stage and that kind of representation before. Like the politics of representation are never sufficient, but necessary, right? It's never enough to just do representation, but you have to start somewhere. Um, and I think in one of the things I did, I said something like, I would hope that people that didn't speak Spanish would see this and be like, what is he actually singing about? And then go look up some songs, look at some lyrics, and then maybe like learn something about like Puerto Rico or Latin America or like, something. Um, so, I think there's a lot of valences to it, but there's also, I mean, we could also, I think, take our turn into D&D at this point if you wanted to, but I don't know if you had other thoughts.
Um, no, I think we've covered a lot of it, but yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it was nice to be represented. It was nice to see that representation. I also think, like, for all of the orgiastic capitalist spectacle that is the Super Bowl, it is truly an American thing, and so it is. It's a two-way street, right?
Right,
Where like they're inviting the NFL is inviting us
right,
in
yeah.
a very deliberate way, and I mean, I don't
Mhm.
think that's a bad thing.
No, I mean,
And it's not nobody's being asked to leave,
yeah, true. Yeah, 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 yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and I also saw some funny stuff to the effect of like, if you're looking for your, revolutionary, socialist politic in Bad Bunny, maybe try somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's also a really good point. Like, no one's being kicked out, and the NFL, for what it's worth, like stood behind him the entire time. We're just like, nope, we're doing this. This is going to be great. And hey,
Yeah.
they were right. Um, and just the sheer like the sheer kind of media spectacle of like, it's Bad Bunny, Lady Gaga, Ricky Martin as the kind of main musical guest, but then there's also like Cardi B is just a backup dancer, like she's just there.
Yep.
Cardi B, Carol G, Jessica Alba, Pedro Pascal. I forget who else was in that group, but
Yeah,
like those are the
I had to go back and see some of these things again because I was like, who, where, what, when?
yeah. I clocked Pedro Pascal, but I missed Cardi B initially. But yeah, so there was just a lot there. But I think like my this question of like representation and also like storytelling, right? Like that whole show was telling a story about how Bad Bunny feels about Puerto Rico, right? Like what is the story of Puerto Rico? How can you communicate that to an audience in 13 minutes? What are the important things to emphasize? And and that kind of storytelling is tricky. And granted, he had a gigantic production team and 300 something performers, but it's this question of like how do you stay true to a particular background or aesthetic or ethnicity or whatever, while also still inviting people in and still allowing people to kind of join you, but not compromising on what you're doing in terms of how you want to tell that story. Um, and that I think is
So
where like yeah, go ahead.
no, and I'm like, this is where I think as we really turn into to
Yeah,
D&D, how do you bring these sort of authenticity, right? I think is sort
right.
of what we're trying to maybe talk about a little bit here, among
Yeah,
other things. But like, how do you
yeah,
bring that into uh, something that you're trying to share with the broadest possible audience,
right.
right? Because
Yeah,
again, like it's about bringing things in, not kicking things out.
right. And I think there's also like a certain amount of like you have to have good faith that people or rather, you have to like trust that people are going to bring a good faith attitude toward things when they're trying to engage with it, and allow them space to enter. But then, the politics of that are fraught, of course, for different groups and different people. Because, like, people who are, so I'll use myself, right? Like, I am a tall, relatively white passing Latino man, right? Like, the way I show up in the world means that, like, my sitting down at, like, let's say a con table, for example, to run a game of D&D has different valences, right? And my ability to bring a story to the table that plays on some part of my identity or is drawn from something that I'm interested in, like has a different kind of feel to it. Which is what I guess what I'm trying to say is like, we as people from an underrepresented group are not required to bring people into our stories necessarily. Like, not everything is for everyone. But I think there is value in if you feel safe to do so, and if you feel like you have something you want to share, like that can be a really valuable thing. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I agree. Like,
yeah,
I don't think we're saying it. I don't think you've said anything controversial, at least as
yeah,
far
no,
as
no,
I'm
no. I
concerned.
will,
But I think that is there is a thing where it's like and like this is a thing that people do all the time where they try and leverage sort of parts of their cultural identity in an exclusionary way to like push people out.
Mhm.
But I think that's not the goal here. Uh, but I think what I so going back to what we're saying in terms of we were just talking about how complicated it is to sort of bring these to tell these interesting stories that are evoking maybe cultural things that aren't sort of part of the mainstream,
Yeah,
um, that might be personal to someone as a creator, and how you bring that in to a broad audience. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And I think maybe do you want to talk a little bit about your approach when you're doing that with because you're sort of working on uh, no secret that you have
yeah,
a book of sort of uh, Mesoamerican inspired a setting for D&D that you're sort of working on, and we've
yeah,
sort of
like sort of. I mean, like, it's there. I've got a world thing that I'm building, but I mean, but I'm also curious because, like, I think the thing that is most developed in all of that is the adventure I wrote based on the Legend of La Llorona, which you run. So,
yeah,
I think to me that creating that adventure was, a labor of love, but then also, it was trying to, how do you balance the kind of specificities of this legend? La Llorona, for those that don't know, is the weeping woman, a figure in especially Mexican, but just generally Mesoamerica, like, Mexico, Central
yeah,
America.
it's like super Latin American. Like I think it
Yeah,
exists like across in various different forms, but it's like this yeah, it's a
yeah,
ghost story
yeah,
that's spans cultures.
exactly. Yeah, so but yeah, definitely it's very Latin American. And the idea is there's a woman who falls in love with a man, they have kids, he runs off and cheats on her with some other woman, and then the original La Llorona, she ends up in her jealous rage, drowning herself and then, or sorry, drowning her children and then killing herself. And then she is cursed to forever wander as La Llorona, the weeping woman, forever weeping after her children. And this was always a kind of like, favorite, eat your peas or La Llorona will come and get you. Or like, don't go near the river or La Llorona will get you. Kind of ghost story that people use to kind of get their kids in the line. But in any case, but like, so, you know, there's some gender stuff going on there. I mean, there's a lot of legends of kind of evil female figures that have just kind of are just evil because that's how it is and because misogyny is a thing.
Yeah.
Like there's also one that I know that I think is maybe Mesoamerican generally, but certainly I know in El Salvador is La Siwanaba, which is a kind of another similar, ghostly woman figure who tricks men, and like she looks beautiful from behind. When she turns around, she's got a horse skull instead of a head. And anyway, so there's lots of these kind of like female demons stories. And so in building this adventure, La Llorona, I wanted to maintain the ghost story aspect of it, but I didn't want to necessarily play into the kind of more misogynist aspects of the story. So that by itself, I guess my point is that like from the jump, I'm already messing with this story a little bit. But there is actually a long history of that, and people kind of telling revisionist versions of this story. But then some of the other stuff that I put in there was stuff that was really more just like specific to me and my um, um, and my background. So, for example, like the little town where the adventurers go to that's being haunted by La Llorona is called Izalco. Izalco is a little town in El Salvador that's right next to a volcano that shares the same name. That my grandmother told me about because there's a book called Las cenizas de Izalco, The Ashes of Izalco, which is about this. It's by one of the kind of most famous Salvadoran writers, a woman named Claribel Alegría. And anyway, so that name has been floating around in my head for a while. I thought, oh, that can be the name of this town. The the general store owner is like, whenever I play her, I like think of my grandmother, and I'm like, all right, how my grandmother, who was like a very warm person, but also extremely sharp and like made of steel. Like, how would she kind of, how would she have run a general store, and how would she have her ear to the ground for all the gossip happening in this town? And I added also in a kind of Deus ex machina thing for whenever it's necessary. There's another Salvadoran legend about the cadejos, which are these kind of big, like mastiff-like dogs that are, one is white and one is black, and the white one is good and the black one is evil. And they kind of, there's always two of them. The black one will like drag people down to hell or punish people, haunt them. The white one will help lost travelers, things like that. So, so I brought a lot of stuff into it that was, not kind of generally Mesoamerican or Latin American, but was stuff that I, just loved and wanted to kind of celebrate as part of this D&D adventure. And and I think like in writing it, I had always intended it to be like at least a little bilingual, like some things are in Spanish, but you don't need to know Spanish in order to kind of engage with it. And for the most part, that seems to have worked. People that have played it have seemed to enjoy it. Yeah, anyway, I'm talking too much. I don't know, Gustavo, like, how was your
No,
experience playing it?
I think it's great. I think a few things I think that make it really great. One, that it's very personal to you. Like La Llorona. Let's also tap into maybe a little bit of your musicology thing. La Llorona is a really famous and beautiful and oft covered and repeated and sort of, it's not even covered, it's like a folk song, so it's like
Yeah.
it's often sung and people put their own spin on it and their own styles on
Mhm,
it. There's lots of beautiful versions of it,
mhm,
and some of them are quite famous, and
yeah,
like in the Latin community, it is likely that you at some point there was a version of this song playing in your house at
yeah.
some point,
Especially if you ever
and
watch the movie Coco.
yeah, yeah, it's literally in the movie Coco,
Yeah.
but I think also La Llorona is like, as you kind of pointed out, there's a universality to this sort of folk trope of the betrayed woman or the ghostly
Mhm,
woman, the woman in the water. Like,
yeah.
there's like a, what is it? Is it? There's like an Irish folk tale about like a
Is it like
beautiful.
selfies? Like they
It's
turn
like the
into.
Selkies or the Kelpies or something like this, and it's
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
the it's woman horse thing where yeah, they
yeah,
um and they draw you in, and like the dogs, like the Hound of the Baskervilles is playing
yeah.
on a similar folktale from the UK of these
Mhm,
black dogs that are bad omens and can haunt you, drag you to hell, whatever it is.
yeah.
um and so like these touchstones are specific to something, but also universal in a lot of ways.
Mm,
Um, I love that for you. So the first time I was introduced to the adventure, I played it with, and Chris was running it. And he did this sort of grandmotherly storekeeper character, and like she's awesome. And you did it, and it was your abuelita, but
yeah,
like I did it, it was my abuelita, but
yeah,
like abuelitas, it's a little bit like, and this is again like a little bit like the babushka, right?
right,
Like
yeah,
there's a kind of little Latin lady
yeah.
that is like where like they're these sort of delicate tiny people who have like a center of gravity that is like
Around
that
which
is
world orbit, like, yeah,
yeah, it's like if she sets her mind to it, she's gonna move the mountain like no
yeah,
problem. It
mhm,
will, it will,
yeah,
like the will is unbreakable. And yeah, and so like I channel the sort of it's those same ideas
yeah, yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
I'm doing it too. And so like uh I think that's
And
really
like,
fun. And
yeah,
I think that's what kind of makes it like it's the specific but universality. And I think that's a really interesting thing to find these things. And sometimes I think it happens without meaning to, where you find these things that are just like human stories that have been
mm,
through the power of storytelling over time and history and moving through and across culture, how they become
mm,
like specific, right? Like the cadejo is like a very specific version of this kind of like very broad,
mm,
oft
mhm.
repeated. It's like so it's this is what people originally meant when they talked about memes, right?
Yeah,
Where
or
it's just like
folklore,
it's an
yeah,
idea that takes different forms, iterative over time,
right,
as cultures bring
yeah,
it in, put their spin on it, it becomes a thing, and then it moves
yeah.
on into like there's other versions of it.
In fact, not
Um,
to be the insufferable professor about it, but there's a fairy tale scholar named Jack Zipes who talks about fairy tales as memes in precisely that way of like they accrete meaning over time and shift and change. Um, I was just looking at the chat. Will says I've dabbled from a very high level at world building. I haven't drilled down to societies and cultures, but it's so easy to use real world examples as scaffolding, but that feels risky in a way. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, you have to tread carefully, and I think like there is something about, I'm not going to go in there and world build something built on African folklore, for example, right? Because I don't have a personal connection to that. And like, you know, the politics of that are very complicated. Even if I did all the research in the world, right, and was like the most well-versed person ever in that, it still would be very fraught. In part because, like, whose story is that to tell? Who benefits when that story is told, etc. Right? And that, I mean, that's a whole thing we don't have to go into. But I also just thought it was funny. Oh yeah, selkies are seals, seals to women. And then Will says, "Okay, I think chat needs to hear these impressions of our various abuelitas." Uh, I don't know that I'm ready to do that, but I will play La Llorona. I've got the guitar there.
yeah.
But I don't know.
Yes, the guitar is finally coming out.
Yeah,
Um,
I embarrassed myself on live stream. There was something else I was going to say about all of this and storytelling and oh yeah, and Bad Bunny and like how this relates to that. There, as you said, right, there are these kind of elements of these stories that are like, folklore or fairy tale or whatever, kind of grounded in these very, very deeply rooted human things that find their own kind of instantiations or expressions depending on the culture. And so I don't know. I'm always very wary of the word like universal or universalism, but I do think that there are things that are shared among like, big groups within the greater population of humanity. Um, and but like there's always particular flavors to it. Like, the babushka as slash abuelita kind of comparison, I think, is a good one, right? Is like there's always going to be somebody's grandma whose blood is made of steel or like molten iron, right? And they're just going to get their shit done.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not, I mean, and like, but then the variety of that changes a little bit. So, because what I'm thinking is like with Bad Bunny, right? People were brought into that story so that even if you don't know all the references, like there's still very much this kind of joyful character to it all, to this kind of like these celebrations, like the wedding in the middle, right? Like that's very much something people can understand. I think people can grab onto certain things when you tell that story, but it's okay to have like multiple levels, I think, going on there with like
Yeah.
but then also like I was also thinking like, you ran it, you've run it. But like you also have the experience of having an abuelita, right? And like and knowing that. So I wonder like if if slash when I put this out. I don't know, we've talked about me putting it on the website a little bit. Like if other people run it who don't have that experience, like how would it work for them? How would they feel about it?
Um, I think this is a good question. I'm just
Mm,
now I'm gonna think out loud a little bit.
yeah.
I think like a lot of these things, like when you are creating one of these things to share, what you would do is maybe just sort of sketch out the character and its motivations, right? But
Yeah.
I think one of the things you want to avoid doing is, you know, giving people uh specific characterizations that
Yeah.
could become caricature, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Um, you know what I mean? I think this is an area that's like that can be very fraught again,
Yeah.
where you by perhaps invoking something that is a common stereotype, you
Right.
are propagating it into your game somehow. So
Yeah.
it's you want to bring uh as as the creator, right, as the author of the thing, you want to bring like sort of a what am I trying to say? Like a narrative neutrality to
Yeah.
that a little bit, and then, as the performer, you bring, like, a different energy, right? The DM, like, there's a lot of overlap here, but, like,
Mm,
I think and this happens, I think, with anybody who's doing any sort of role play, it's you
yeah.
are bringing pieces of yourself
Yeah.
to the thing that you're doing,
Hmm.
um, and letting that happen organically, you know what I mean? And so, like, for you and me, that being the abuelita
Yeah.
is makes makes sense to us for a number of different reasons, right?
Right.
Because of the text, because of the role, because of the setting, because of the place, because of our personal experiences. Uh, that is a huge part of it. And for
Yeah.
somebody else, that may manifest differently.
Yeah.
But this storekeeper can also be a polite little old lady who
Yeah.
has a very strong will, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
that doesn't that can mean different things. I mean,
Yeah.
like somebody who
Absolutely.
might be coming to it from a different background may characterize it more of like a babushka thing.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Mhm.
I think as long as it's, you said this
Yeah.
earlier. I think it is one of the
Mhm.
most important things with like this hobby in general is you have to enter into it with this.
Mm.
How did you put it exactly? Like
Like good faith approach or something. I don't
a
know.
good faith approach that
Yeah.
nobody's here to hurt feelings, to make fun of somebody. We're trying to make fun together,
Mhm.
and have a good time. And I think, like, you know, not necessarily to dive into it. I think that this question of world building, when things are sort of outside
Yeah.
of your comfort zone, is the thing that I think, like, you know, in chat, like, it is. I think it is appropriate and entirely good to approach these things with an air of wariness. Um,
Yeah.
and just to be really careful around it. I don't
Yeah.
think that means that you need to hew to your own culture in a
Yeah.
way. Like, exclusively, because I think that also creates another problem, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You are now so now you've closed your world to outside influences, but I think yeah, you just have to be careful, like,
Yeah,
and be respectful, because like if you are taking something, remember that it's not yours. You are
yeah,
borrowing it. It is a gift to you, and you need to be a good steward of that.
yeah,
And I think if you take sort of those approaches to these things, you're going to be in better shape than if you don't.
yeah. So
But yeah,
two
just
two examples of that I think do this quite well. One is Coyote and Crow. I think, the way that that's written is good at kind of allowing people that are not native to kind of come into that world, but then also like being good about setting boundaries. Like, look, if you're not native, don't play a two-spirit character because that is something that is very, you know, it's a sacred kind of concept and it has a lot of stuff around it that like that's probably not appropriate, but it is otherwise welcome. And like that, there's other moments of kind of, be careful with this or don't do this, right? For reasons of just being like honoring that culture. But for the most part, it's just kind of like, yeah, we just want people to play this game. Like, you want the people that publish games and put them out in the world want people to play them and want people to engage with these things that they find to be valuable or interesting and worthy of being shared. So, I think as long as you're coming into it and you're, being respectful and kind of, again, like approaching it from a place of wanting to celebrate things and have fun and tell a good story, I think that's really good. The other one that I'm thinking of is Nawal, which is the Powered by the Apocalypse, yeah, which we eventually are going to play. But what I like about that one is that like every single playbook, every single role you can take starts with you are Mexican and you are poor, right? So it's very specific to a specific place, but within that, there's plenty of ways you can play with it. And it's not that you can't, if you're not Mexican and you're not poor, right? It's not that you can't play this. You can bring your own kind of ideas and backgrounds to it, but you have to, or at least, one hopes that you would use your own experiences, link them with what these characters are or how they start out and just develop it from there, right? Like um with of course, yeah, and I think you were getting this a little bit too, Gustavo, like, with role playing, right? You're you want to make this character a fully fleshed out, like, character, not a caricature, right? And I think like it can because of the way that certain cultures are portrayed, it can be easy to fall into those things. So it's just, being, yeah, not punching down per se.
not
Yeah,
punching
exactly.
down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's tough though, because like I will say that sometimes leaning into a trope can be a lot of fun, but
Mm,
it's tough because a
yeah.
trope is not necessarily like there's a line there, and it is
Right.
I'm trying to think of how to define it, and I can't really come up with a good sort of like uh litmus test for that
Yeah. Well, I think like tropes are
test.
like maybe the trope is more about, well, it can also be a straight, like I'm thinking about like behavior, right? Like I'm thinking about like, a trope of a character that, just has a weird accent, for example. Like,
Right.
that's just your shtick, right? Um that yeah, I mean like that, depending on the accent, right? That can very quickly get bad.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah, I think
context, right?
yeah,
Context. No, but
yeah,
I think that's the actual answer. It's context, right?
yeah,
It is making judicious choices about the environment that you're in, the
yeah,
people that you're sitting with, and like and sort of that. And just
yeah.
trying to be yeah, because I don't want to suck the fun out of it, saying that like, hey,
Oh yeah,
look, everybody has to have a super serious backstory.
yeah,
And if you don't stick to that super serious backstory, it's
yeah,
lame. Like if you want to play like crazy chef hot dog cart guy with
It's just
like,
like
and that's
three
the
words
whole,
association for a second there.
yeah, the whole bit of your character. I
Right.
think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is as you say, right? It depends on the table. It depends on the context, right? Like, it's one thing if you're doing just a silly one shot or like, a one-off thing where it's like, yeah, this person's whole thing is that they were a cabbage vendor in another universe, somehow isekai'd into this medieval fantasy. Um, sure, go for it. But like if you're, doing a very like, epic dramatic campaign, it's open-ended and everybody wants a lot of character development and stuff. It's like maybe rethink that or at least be open to the possibility that your cabbage vendor is going to have to grow in some interesting and different ways than you weren't expecting.
Okay, so last time I did La Llorona,
Yeah.
um, we were doing it for, I forget who it was. It doesn't matter. We were doing it for a group of students on campus.
Yeah.
And you were upstairs and I was downstairs,
Yeah.
and I started the game, and we were playing, and oh my god, what this young adult came and sat down at my table after we've been playing for about 10 minutes, and it was two who were sort of joining a little late because of various reasons, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I will introduce them. And then so I sort of opened a side door in the room, and
Yeah.
two rival adventurers walk in.
Yeah.
And the first one's like, I have a sort of pretty regular backstory where I am a wandering monk. And the other one was like, I have a pig and I love it, and that's the character. And it was like, and I had been spinning this like sort of quasi tragic ghost. I was leaning into sort of the spooky season of it all. This was right before
Yeah.
Halloween,
Yeah.
to tell this, like meaningful, sad story of
Yeah.
like trauma. And the pig kid showed up, the halfling that's like, oh man, what was the name was like Smelly Booger Pants. I don't know.
Oh no.
And I was like,
Totally not a match.
this is, and it was the like only person who was like, they were just so far out on a limb with this bit,
Yeah.
that no, like they just had no corresponding weight at the table. Like there wasn't even
Oh,
like this. It was like everything's here, and then this
yeah.
was,
Way the hell out there in left
and I
field.
was
Yeah.
like, okay, we got to work with it, right? And
Well, yeah.
of course, they were absolutely welcome at the table. I did our best. I did my best
Yeah.
to incorporate that into the evening that we had, and I think everybody had a good time in the end. But it was, I was for a second, I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. No, for
It was,
sure.
I think, one of my most challenging moments as a DM in the
Well,
recent
I will say,
past.
like, I did you no favors, I think, with that adventure because it is very sad and tragic, and the content warnings are kind of a lot.
Yeah,
Because there's like, mention of suicide and mention of domestic abuse and like just not super like lighthearted things
there's a
going on.
lot of trauma, sort of,
Yeah,
that is
it's
the
I mean,
underlying thing. It felt
better,
like a little, but for what it's worth, it's on par with most Disney movies.
yeah, sure, good point.
So,
Well, yeah,
which always have a deeply traumatic sort of underpinning, like
oh
just
yeah.
so that everybody knows, it's
I mean,
always something
starting
awful
from
has happened.
Bambi and going forward.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, I mean, so my friend Heather ran it too, and she was like, when we talked about it afterwards, she was like, "Yeah, it's really sad." I'm like, yeah, I know. And then also like they wanted to like go. There's like a kind of background villain sort of situation, and the players were like, "Wait, but we want to go get that guy." It's like, sorry, it's like it's the two shot basically. Um, so but I ran it recently for a group that I'm DMing where it's a kind of the plan is to make it a longer campaign, and so there I have lots of tie-ins and ideas for like, all right, they finish this story and this adventure, like where do they go next? But anyway, but no, but so there's a comment in the chat about I think part of the difficulty we have is we grew up in a sea of pop culture that wielded tropes and caricatures for jokes constantly. And yeah, I mean, I think this is what's I think really fun and meaningful to me about about writing these kinds of adventures, writing these stories in this kind of, Mesoamerican inspired setting, is that it is an opportunity to tell these stories and kind of do so in a way that does not rely on those tropes and caricatures. And I mean, I think one thing that like I think about a lot is, every so often, just keeping it to D&D, like the publishers back in like the I want to say like the 80s ish, would throw out like something Aztec adjacent, but like Aztec adjacent in like, the it's all lizard people and they're all cannibals. Like what are we saying here? So like there are certain, so in inclusion question mark, but again, like it's relying on very well-worn caricatures and tropes about like this one society, and that largely is just like, a play on human sacrifice, which is a whole thing we could get into, but and to what extent did the Spanish invent all of this, or inflame it past the point of all recognition because they wanted to justify their conquest, whatever. I don't know that soapbox, but my point is like, there is I think there's something about subverting tropes and caricatures, while also bringing in new settings and cultures and stories and cosmologies, even, that I find really, really rewarding about this kind of stuff and about writing these kinds of adventures. Um, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that like to the point in chat about pop culture wielding tropes and characters for jokes constantly. I think culture has been doing that forever. I mean, that
Right,
is, yeah, it's this, it's that the famous trope that there are no new ideas, right?
right, right, sure.
We're just kind of working with the same tools over and over and subverting them and changing them and tweaking them so that it's becoming ours for now.
Hmm.
Um, uh, which I think is good. I don't know. I hear what you're saying about like being wary of universalism, but I do think that there is
Hmm.
something that is of about Open the Gates Gaming is this approach that storytelling is a and play are
Yes.
human things that
Hmm.
everyone deserves to have, and I think that that is
Yeah.
true because I think that left to their own devices, people play and people tell stories,
Hmm.
and that can take many many forms. But I think it is
Hmm.
just a thing that is is a human thing, and I think
Yeah, and I mean,
sometimes finding those commonalities between us, I think
mhm.
is part of the bridge building.
Yeah, well, and I think this actually brings us back to Bad Bunny in some ways, right, with the halftime show, in that, just because it is all very Latino, frankly, and Puerto Rican specifically, doesn't mean that people didn't have a good time, right? Like, those stories, the imagery, even if you don't speak a word of Spanish, like, plenty of people have been talking about how, like, I mean, this was still like entertaining and meaningful and joyful, and like people got up and danced, and like there was clearly a story being told that even if you didn't understand the particulars, you could still draw something from that. So yeah.
And to sort of build on that a little bit, or to just echo it, and reinforce it, like the NFL didn't pick Bad Bunny because they thought people were going to have a bad time, right?
Yeah.
And then the NFL also didn't pick Bad Bunny and then tell him, "Hey, we need you to do a country set,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They said, "We pick you to do the most important thing we're going to have all season that's not actual football,
Right.
and we want you to do what you do,"
Yeah.
right?
Hmm. Yep, totally. Yeah. So yeah, that there is a lot of value in presenting stories and telling stories. Yeah, I don't know. Now I have to think about, what do we write? How do we write it? Like, because I'm still kind of a little stuck on this question of like, how does someone presented with an adventure, in a setting or a cultural context that is not their own, how do they run that? But I mean, I think you also kind of answered that question, right? Is like, you enter into it and you bring your own associations, but you honor kind of the original material as much as you can. Um,
That's I mean, that is yes, that's my approach, and I think it's
yeah.
not a bad one.
It's just striking me that like the only other people who have run this adventure are also Latino or Latina, I'd say.
Yeah.
Right. So like that is like, but at the same time, it's like it's not that I mind that, and it's not that I, frankly, if only Latina people ever ran this adventure, cool. Like that's fine. I don't need to, you know, make a bunch of money off of this or ensure that it reaches the furthest corners of the TTRPG gaming space. Um, as long as the people have some fun with it, and
Right, and
people,
that's not to say that's the only people who will run it. I mean, like, this is not a
yeah.
again,
I mean,
um,
I guess we'll see, but yeah,
and maybe at some point we'll put it, you'll put it out into the world, for sort of people to see, and you know, uh, I think, in a sort of in a broader way, maybe like I don't know, but yeah, I think it's okay for people to have their own stories, and I think it is also okay to share those stories beyond. And like you were saying this a little bit, like some things are maybe not always for everybody, and that's
yeah,
okay. That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah.
um,
No, yeah, Will said in the chat, I think this is about the Bad Bunny show. As a visually, it was good because if you weren't paying attention to the words, there was plenty to see going on. Yeah, like well, I think like you can expand that idea in the sense of like maybe if you don't get all the references or you don't understand the specifics of something in a a TTRPG session, right? As long as there's enough other stuff to grab onto, it's like, oh, I don't know anything about La Llorona, but I see there's like this kind of banshee figure up there that wants to strangle me with her shawl. Maybe that shouldn't happen. Like that. There's stuff there, and I'm also thinking about. So I've run, this adventure for people that don't speak Spanish or don't. Well, definitely if they don't speak Spanish. They also definitely don't speak Nahuatl. I use some kind of indigenous names and terminology occasionally, and like if you don't speak those languages, pronouncing them, or like if I say them, like Izalco or Nunez, is the name of an NPC, it doesn't necessarily catch in your mind in the same way, and so I just have to be careful about it. Oh, it's spelled this way. Um, but my point is like even if your mind skips over like a name or something because it's not from a language that you're familiar with, like I think there's two things there. One, like it's an opportunity to learn something, and then two, it is not like it's not the end all be all, right? Like there's other things to grab onto. It's like, oh, like this guy's name is Nunez, but he's also like the half-orc bartender of this random inn here,
yeah,
and maybe he knows something about the town. Like I'll ask him. Like there's layers there. Um,
yeah, and like chat is saying sort of this exact thing here, where
yeah,
you run it the way you do, you know,
yeah,
you do what you do as a
yeah,
DM at your table, while trying to respect the source material.
yeah,
I think that is the most we can hope for from almost anything.
yeah,
I and not to prolong it because I know we're getting close
yeah,
to an hour.
yeah.
But I think there is something to me that about all of this Discord that we've been talking about, with the Bad Bunny show and this sort of foreign language content,
Mm,
and being respectful, and some of the other work that you do, with our group in terms of world building, which is like bringing in opera. Opera,
mm,
as far as I remember, is like a major part of the canon, and also not
yeah.
in English for the most part.
Good
When
point.
you're
Yeah,
thinking, um,
yeah,
uh, half of these guys were German guys writing in Italian.
yeah,
and like nobody's batting an eye when that happens.
Well, indeed. Well, yeah, for the most part. I mean, some people are I guess,
Well,
but to your point though, right? Like there are, you know, something that is in Italian or German or French has a different,
oh yeah,
resonance
oh it's
for reasons we don't need. I mean, we all know. We don't
mhm.
need to get into that. Like there's something interesting about the opera adventures in that they are, yes, like they, for the most part, the ones that I have written have drawn on fairly canonical operas. That is, operas that are fairly well embedded in the performing repertoire or in the way we tell the history of that genre. There's one or two that are a little like out there in left field, like the Rimsky-Korsakov Legend of Katesh one. But
An absolute banger if you ever get the chance.
you can check out the live stream we did of it on our YouTube channel.
I don't know what you're
Um,
talking about.
yeah, it was fun. We had Doug Cockle and Amy Vorpal going at it. Uh, yeah, they started a candy store stand,
Yes,
and it was a death metal goat. Was the anyway?
yeah,
Um,
it's great. I
I
don't know if that's somewhere. I think that's. I don't know
think
where
it's
that
on our
is,
YouTube.
but it is very. I had a great time playing it, and I
Yeah,
think everyone had a pretty good time.
yeah.
Um,
But anyway, but there's something interesting there about like the source material and what gets to count as universal, or dare I say it, what gets to count as Western, right? What gets to count as the unmarked, right? The stuff that's just there, right?
right.
So, and that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other live stream probably. But shall we close with a song?
Yes, please.
I say as though like I'm not the one running this. Um, so let's see. I don't know if this thing's in tune. Um, it's nice is this thing actually has a tuner built into it.
Ooh, fancy.
Close enough. Oh wait. I don't know, Gustavo. What are we doing next week on the stream while I futz with this?
On this stream, we are going to be doing another installment of we did a little actual play last week. We're doing a 3-shot of uh a game called Mothership, um which was written by a member of our team, Dakota, who is one of our student uh, members of the team, and he's written this cool adventure, and he's running it for us, and it's weird and fun. And
It's
so
going
we're
to be
trying a
crazy.
little bit of an actual play thing, very casual. So we've got part 2 coming up next week, and then weeks after that we'll be presumably finishing. Um, while I'm plugging actual play stuff, we have a fundraising actual play coming up next Wednesday.
Yes.
A little bit before noon, we'll be getting started
Yeah, doors at 11:45, so to speak. It starts at noon.
with a certain Doug Cockle, voice of Geralt of Rivia, The Witcher, who is
Legends of Sport.
a Virginia Tech alum, uh, and a member of our advisory board, and just a really great guy. And I'll get to play too. So
Yeah. It's going to be a wild time. We're also one of
it's
the full professors of theater here at Virginia Tech is going to be playing a just incredibly well thought out character in a very silly one shot.
guys,
So
the what sh- yeah, what she's written is
it's
beautiful.
crazy. I'm going to preface what I'm about to do with a few things. One, I have been teaching myself this instrument for about 3 months, so I'm gonna fuck up. So please don't hold it against me. Anyway, yeah. So La Llorona is, in addition to a legend, also and a folk tale, and a ghost story, also a song, as Gustavo mentioned. There are lots and lots of verses. that people have used different points. There's and like Gustavo said, lots of people have sung this song. Two of my favorites are the versions by Chavela Vargas, who was a very famous Mexican ranchera singer, and Angela Aguilar, who's a more recent kind of singer, does a lot of kind of different stuff, but definitely Mexican folk music as well. So yeah, I'm not gonna try playing the intro because I'm still learning that. So I'll sing a couple of verses. Um, let's see. Maybe I should translate them. I'll just sing them and then I can translate them. So let's see. I don't know. Does that come through? Atlas? I don't know. Can you hear that? All right, great. Let's see.
Hmm. Yeah.
Santo, sé que tienen las flores, llorona las flores del campo santo, que cuando las mueve, llorona aparece, está llorando, que cuando las mueve, llorona está llorando. Let me start that verse again. Porque puedo taparme con tu reposo, yo que puedo de frío. So that's yeah. Anyway, so
Chris,
that's
that was beautiful. The
oh,
person, but it was cutting in and out a little bit,
oh
unfortunately.
no. Oh well.
But the parts that came through was great.
Yeah.
You have a beautiful
Well,
singing voice, and the guitar sounded good too.
yeah, no, it's like playing music on live stream is like not great or easy.
We can get you a
To
better setup if you do it again.
Well, yeah, fair.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of settings that we got to tweak. Somebody was
Okay. Well,
one of the resident audio nerds at work was coaching me through this the other day.
oh, interesting.
Um,
Anyway, I don't know what were those verses. Let's see. I don't know what the flowers of the graveyard hold, but when the wind blows, they look as though they are crying. Oh, Llorona, take me to the river. Cover me with your shawl because I am dying of cold. So lighthearted, chill, all that stuff. Um, oh no, your mic is not cooperating. Oh well. Well, I tried. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Any closing thoughts about Bad Bunny La Llorona storytelling? Um,
uh, I had a really nice time talking about this, and we went to a lot of places that I didn't think we were going to go to. I think we landed there organically, and I think it was a really nice conversation to have with you, Chris. Thank you
yeah,
for doing that. Um, uh, and I also want to shout out Will, who has been
yeah,
adding a lot in chat this week, and I have enjoyed that as well. Um,
agreed.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
thanks.
thank you, Gustavo, for joining me on this chat. And yeah, please do tune in to our live stream next week on Wednesday for to save the hokey bird, once again, it's been kidnapped, and now all the heroes have shown up in the lobby of an opera house. So we'll go from there. So yeah, have a good rest of your night, everybody, and we'll see you next week.